It is said that human beings are not born bad, but that their environment shapes them to be who they are. This is what Old Man Lin's life is said to have decreed. But it's true. Stay until the end of the video and find out. Before starting, leave your registration with the like button and subscribe to our stories. They will surely catch you. Now, activate the bell so we can begin. Lin's childhood was a whirlwind of tragedy and helplessness that pushed him down a dark and lonely path. Born in an impoverished rural area of El Salvador, Lin was the third of 5 siblings in a family where hunger and violence were constant. His companions were a violent alcoholic who abused his mother and children, leaving them physically and emotionally scarred from an early age. Lina learned that violence and aggression were acceptable ways of dealing with the world. Her childhood was marked by the lack of affection, and the constant feeling of danger often meant he had to scavenge for food or steal to feed his family. School was a luxury he could rarely afford, as hard work and survival were his family's main concerns. As Lin grew up, he became increasingly resentful and distrustful. He saw his father as a role model, a man who imposed his will through brute force. The idea that life could be different, that he could be different, seemed increasingly distant. At age 12, he experienced the death of one of his brothers at the hands of a rival gang. This tragic event marked a turning point in his life, filling him with hatred and a thirst for revenge. He decided to join a local gang where he found the sense of belonging and protection he longed for. The gang was a family, a refuge in a world that he had rejected over time. Lin rose through the ranks of La Pandilla, gaining respect and fear in equal measure. His reputation for being relentless and ruthless preceded him, and he embraced it like a shield against a world that had wounded him time and again. On the morning of January 7th, 2003, the print press proudly announced that the UN had completed the verification of the peace accords, marking the close of a symbolic cycle. The word peace could be officially considered graduated and filed away in some New York office. That same night, the old Linja, identified by the police as the main leader of Barrio 18 in El Salvador, visited the Dina neighborhood in southern San Salvador to embrace and show his support for Chino Picer, the young local leader. However, the atmosphere in the area was tense due to a recent incident in which Picer had ordered the execution of one of his soldiers, known as El Kyush, as punishment for losing a weapon. This action outraged everyone in the gang, especially Cranky, the leader of the nearby Ibu colony. He had influence in the area and warned Picer that the life of a gang member wasn't worth a lost weapon. Despite this, 19-year-old Picer felt confident enough to decide for himself what was fair in his territory, in his drug market, and on the 8 streets he controlled for the gang's leadership and for Lin, who was his visible face that same night while Lin and Picer were talking. Cranky and his lieutenant, Duque, arrived at Dina and waited after Lin left. They approached Picer, pulled him aside, and murdered him in the street with 17 shots from AK-47s and M16s, weapons of war used to send a message to all members of the gang. The way they were being governed was not to continue. Lin considered Cranky's action a betrayal, believing that he should have been consulted before making that decision. For him, killing someone he had just hugged was an intolerable breach of trust. Motivated by Lin, many armed gang members searched for Cranky and Duke in the following days to avenge Picer's death, although they were unable to find them. This situation marked the beginning of a deadly confrontation to establish boundaries and make it clear that in the Barrio 18 neighborhood, there was only one way to punish and only one judge. In the 1970s in Los Angeles, a white man approached a Salvadoran boy, about 12 years old, who was looking out a restaurant window and said, with a contemptuous accent, "You don't speak Spanish," implying that he shouldn't speak Spanish. These words resonated in the boy's mind, who years later became a gang member, adopted the name Lintz, and joined the AN Street, and tattooed his first 18 as a symbol of belonging in El Salvador decades later. No one remembers that X that was. Change for an eye here is Lin, and on July 2nd, 2011, he turned 49 years old. The influence and mystery surrounding Old Lin in the 18th neighborhood are due in large part to his enigma and the shadow he casts, which changes height and impenetrability depending on the light and the perspective from which it is observed. His authority, many sometimes he seems mythical, reigning over burly, armed men. His rise to the top of the gang in late 2002 is an enigma to many, with rumors suggesting that in the 1980s he sold drugs to the Barrio 18 neighborhood in the United States. Although some doubt that he even speaks English or has been to the North, Lin's guerrilla past with the Central American Revolutionary Workers' Party, PRTC, also contributes to his long shadow. Although he himself has publicly admitted his membership in the PRTC, rumors within the community exaggerate his influence, making him appear even more formidable, as if he had learned to be tougher and more deadly in the guerrilla. This effect is also seen in other 40-somethings from the Barrio 18 neighborhood who serve in the army during El Salvador's Civil War. Having fought in a war grants them an aura of respect and experience that young gang members can't match. Even despite his most violent and extreme acts, the irony of the first prison outside, that of a revolutionary, is not lost on him. Captured at 18, in an ambush in Sonsonate in February 1981, he was imprisoned in the Sonsonate prison and then in clandestine prisons before being transferred to La Esperanza in Mariona, where he occupied a cell reserved for political prisoners. Although he was captured alongside guerrilla leaders such as Arlen Yosapa and Celia Margarita Alfaro, who still received tributes from the PTC, Lin seems to have been forgotten by many in the FMLN. Another PTC militant who shared a sentence with Lin remembers him with long, curly hair, always wearing a dark hat and a green cap with a pin on the visor. Described as serious and not fond of joking, he was someone to talk to. It meant being willing to debate strongly due to his seriousness and clarity of ideas. His prison record includes his imprisonment for subversion and his release by direct order of the Supreme Court of Justice on April 1st, 1982. During his time in prison, Lin returned to the mountains, fighting in the Wasapa volcano under the orders of Manuel Melgar, current Minister of Security. Although his former partner claims that Lin deserted the PRTC in 1983, Lin only mentions that he returned to Los Angeles, where in the 1980s he joyfully welcomed the first graffiti of the Mara Salvatrucha gang. In the neighborhoods inhabited predominantly by Central Americans, he celebrated the rise of Salvadorans in the city, being a member of the Ealing Street Gang. At that time, the deadly enmity that has united the MS-13 and Barrio 18 since 1989 did not yet exist. Although Lin maintained more ties to El Salvador than most of the young people who grew up in the city. Southern California, with a surname and nostalgia, a Salvadoran speaking, thinking, and acting in English, she didn't take root there and return to her country. Her shadow faded until a file revealed that he entered the Santa Ana prison on December 29th, 1992, accused of robbery, but was released 6 months later after being found innocent. He returned to the same prison on October 12th for homicide. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, we invite you to give us a like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. We continue. What's his life like in the Cecot since his arrival? Lin has maintained a reserved and distant attitude, distancing himself from internal conflicts among the inmates. His reputation as a gang leader has preceded him, which has earned him respect among some inmates and fear among others. However, despite his seemingly privileged position, he has chosen to remain aside from disputes and alliances inside the prison, preferring to keep a low profile and avoid attention. Lin's daily routine in prison is monotonous and bleak. He gets up early each morning to eat a bland, substanceless meal. During the day, he spends most of his time in his cell reflecting on his life and the decisions that led him to that place. He is sometimes allowed out into the yard for a few hours, where he paces in circles, lost in his thoughts while observing others, even with a blank, distant stare. Lin's relationships in prison are few and superficial, although some inmates respect him for his gang history. Most view him with suspicion and caution, aware of his reputation for being ruthless and merciless. He has learned to live with loneliness and isolation, which become his only company amid a sea of unfamiliar and hostile faces, despite his apparent resignation to his fate. There are moments when the shadow of his past grows heavier, on lonely nights when the silence of prison envelopes him. Lin finds himself haunted by memories of his former life. He remembers the faces of those he hurt and the lives he destroyed on his way to the top of the gang. He wonders if he can ever redeem himself for his actions. If he ever will he be able to find the peace that he so yearns for? It could be said that he had the opportunity to have a different life. Yes, it could be said that Lin had the opportunity to have a different life. Despite growing up in a difficult environment and facing numerous adversities, there were times in his childhood where he could have taken a different path if he had received the proper support and guidance. For example, if Lin had had access to a quality education, he could have developed different life skills and perspectives. In addition, if he had received the necessary emotional support at home, he could have learned to manage his emotions in a healthier way and develop more positive relationships with others. However, given the circumstances of his childhood and the environment in which he grew up, Lin was pushed down a path marked by violence and crime. The lack of opportunities and pressure from his environment led him to make decisions that led him down a dark and dangerous path. Ultimately, L's story is a record of how life, circumstances, and opportunities can influence the course we take. Although he had the opportunity to have a different life, circumstances conspired against him, leading him down a path that would change him forever. Thus, we come to the end of this video. If you liked it, I invite you to give us a like so we can continue making more videos like this one. Also, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. I wish you a great day until next time.